What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, exclusively here as always on the Casa D18 Studios channel. I, of course, am your host, the Renegade JJ Williams, and today's going to be a fun one for me because we are going to dive into my favorite Universal monster of all time, 1941's The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr., Claude Rains, Warren William, Ralph Bellamy, Evelyn Ankers, Bela Lugosi, Maria Ospinkaya, and Patrick Knowles. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining me here once again for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews. And like I said during the introduction, today we're going to get into my favorite Universal monster, the Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr. as Lawrence Talbot. And there's a lot I'm going to get into at the end of this. I'm going to help break down why I love this movie so much. But let's get into the synopsis and let's start things off proper as we always do. Now, as our movie opens, Larry Talbot is returning to his ancestral home in Llanwelly, Wales, in order to bury his recently deceased brother and reconcile with his estranged father, Sir John Talbot. Now, while there, Larry begins to fall in love with a local girl named Gwen Conliffe, who runs an antique shop. So, as an excuse to talk to her, he goes over and he purchases a cane, which is decorated with a silver wolf's head as well as the pentagram. And Gwen tells Larry that the pentagram is the sign of the werewolf, and she recites a poem to him. Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfsbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. So over the course of the film, other villagers also recite this poem to Larry whenever the topic of werewolves is brought up. I want to say we hear this about 3 times in total. Later that evening, Larry, Gwen, and Jenny Williams, who's a friend of Gwen's, go to a gypsy camp to have their fortunes told. During Jenny's reading, Bela, the gypsy, sees the mark of the pentagram in Jenny's palm, signaling her as his next victim. Once Bela turns into a werewolf and attacks Jenny, Larry attempts to rescue her. He kills the wolf with his silver cane, but in the process, Larry is bitten on the chest during the struggle. One of the other gypsies happens to come upon the scene in the forest and reveals to Larry that the animal which bit him was actually her son, Bela, in the form of a wolf. The gypsy, whose name is Maliva, also tells Larry that he too will begin to transform into a wolf, since he who is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself. Maliva also informs Larry that the only thing that can kill a werewolf is silver, a silver bullet, or a silver cane, etc. Just like Maliva foretold, when the next full moon comes, Larry transforms into a werewolf and ends up killing several villagers. The following morning, he returns to normal, with initially no memory of his rampage. Now, over time, the recollection of his crimes gradually returns to him, leaving him horrified and racked with guilt. A few days pass, and on the night of the next full moon, Larry begs his father to restrain him in order to prevent him from harming anybody else. And despite Sir John's attempt at restraint, Larry once again transforms into a werewolf, breaks free of his restraints, and this time attacks Gwen. Sir John comes to Gwen's aid and bludgeons the wolf over the head with Larry's cane. As our movie comes to its end, Maliva once again comes upon the scene in the forest and recites a different poem. The way you walked was thorny, through no fault of your own. But as the rain enters the soil, the river enters the sea. So tears run to a predestined end. Now you will find peace for eternity. Sir John and Gwen are horrified once the transformation is complete and it is revealed that the wolf was none other than Sir John's own son, Larry. I've just got to say, such an amazing film. And everything that we think we know about werewolves was created by Kurt Siodmak, the screenwriter of this film. And I hope I pronounced that last name right. This was only one of 3 Universal monsters without a literary source. The other 2 being The Mummy and The Creature from the Black Lagoon. You figure Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Frankenstein, Dracula, The Invisible Man, all came from literary sources. This was one, everything was created. From the sign of the pentagram being the mark of the werewolf, to only being able to kill a werewolf with something silver bullet, silver cane, etc., to the classic poem, even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfsbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. And the story and the actors in this film come across as so believable that we, the audience, believe that this information has been a part of folklore since way before 1941. Because everybody in the film speaks about it, especially to Larry, like, what, you don't know this stuff? By the time the Even a Man poem is repeated the 3rd time, Larry's like, oh, so you've heard that one too? But he'd never heard it before. And I'm sure part of that is because Larry has become Americanized. He left Wales, went to America, was working in California, and when he heard about his brother's death, decided to come home to bury him and try to patch things up with his dad. So I'm sure part of it is his Americanization. But the fact that everybody in this village knows this poem and Larry doesn't, it's just very, very well written to me. And the fact that the Wolfman and the werewolf have become so synonymous in pop culture. I mean, the Wolfman wasn't the very first werewolf film. There had been, I want to say it's called Werewolf of London back in the mid-30s, but it just didn't catch fire the way this one did. Then you had, things like I Was a Teenage Werewolf in the 50s with Michael Landon. You had Teen Wolf in the 80s with Michael J. Fox, and American Werewolf in London in the early 80s, directed by John Landis. The Incredible Hulk is very much a werewolf story. A mild-mannered man who turns into a beast. And especially with the current representations of the Hulk by Edward Norton and Mark Ruffalo, very much wants to rid himself of this curse. And as we'll see as these movies go along, Lawrence Talbot just wants to rid himself of this curse so he can finally die and rest in peace. It's very, very well done and has been such an inspiration for so much. And I'll get to it a little bit more in depth later in the month when we get there, but My first exposure to the Frankenstein monster, to Dracula, and to the Wolfman was Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, which we'll get to later in the month, on the 22nd, I believe. And seeing the way the Wolfman was presented there, although in a little bit more comedic way, but seeing the way that he was presented there really drew me to Lon Chaney Jr., Lawrence Talbot, the Wolfman character. And because of that film, that gateway drug, if you will, I went back to Boris Karloff's Frankenstein. I went back to Bela Lugosi's Dracula, both from 1931. I went back to Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman from 1941. And I explored and dug deeper into these characters. And the one that always stuck to me was the Wolfman, because Dracula knew what he was doing and he enjoyed what he did. The monster, the Frankenstein monster, very much was a child mentality, so he didn't really know what he was doing. A lot of times he's just defending himself. He's just trying to defend himself and the people that he cares about. Despite the fact that he has a criminal brain, people can change, which was made apparent in Bride of Frankenstein. He mainly kills the people that try to threaten him or the people he cares about. And while he doesn't seem to mind so much, if you can say that, since the monster is very much almost in a zombie-like state, but you can't really say that he knows what he's doing. You know what I mean? The Wolfman, he may know what he's doing in the moment, but it's out of that primal nature, that animalistic instinct. And once he returns to Lawrence Talbot, he does not remember for a while what he did. And as soon as it hits him what he did, he is resentful, he is remorseful, he wants to make amends, he's apologetic. He has no control over the beast that comes over him. And that's all that he wants, is control over it. And to get rid of that curse. And as we'll see in the future movies, as his storyline progresses, that is very much his motive, is to get rid of this curse. I love it. I love the makeup. I love the acting. I love the realistic effects. You know, Jeff kind of alluded to it when we did the Renegade recap. Yes. I love the fact that you can see Chaney's facial expressions through the makeup. I talk about it all the time. When he gets his foot stuck in the bear trap, you can see the anguish on his face. Even though it's a rubber boot, so he's not really being hurt. It's a prosthetic rubber boot. The acting conveyed shows emotion on his face. Stuff that you can't really get with a CG character. It's gotten better. But back in 2010, when they remade The Wolfman, it was horrible. You did not get that emotion from the CG Wolfman. And it was one of the things that really turned me off to that retelling of the story. But that's enough about me for right now. I'm curious what you guys think of the Wolfman. Hearing me speak about this, it should be no surprise The Wolfman gets 5 out of 5 stars for me. If I could give more than 5, I would. Considering that I gave Frankenstein 5, I gave The Bride 5, and I love this even more than those. If I could give more than 5 stars, this film would be one of the few to get extra stars out of me. But I've told other people they can't do that, so I'm not going to do that. 5 out of 5 stars for The Wolfman. Again, it should be no surprise. I talk about this film with so much love and so much reverence. I mean, I've got a Wolfman Christmas ornament right over here. I've got multiple Wolfman shirts. I've got a Wolfman air freshener to go into my car once it gets washed the next time. I've got a Wolfman face mask for when I go out in public. I just adore this character. What do you guys think of the Wolfman? Let me know. If you're watching the premiere, leave your thoughts and comments over here. If you're watching on demand later in the day, leave your thoughts and comments down here. Whatever you do, though, when you get out there on social media, let's try to get those hashtags trending. Hashtag Casa D18 Studios, hashtag Renegades Reviews, hashtag Renegade Returns, and of course, the ever popular hashtag Shenanigans. We interrupt this episode of Renegades Reviews for an important announcement about
merchandising.
Merchandising? What's that?
Merchandising. Come, I'll show you. Merchandising, where the real money's made.
Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network for all the t-shirts you see here from the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham himself. You can get shirts for the Jeff Meacham Network, Talk Wrestling, as well as the red and gold Meachamania shirts. And while you're there, don't forget to get your shirts of the Casa D18 Studios Brotherhood, the Dads on Wrestling shirt, the Renegade J.J. Williams, Statboy Sports Bar, and the hashtag Statboy Approved shirt. Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network and score your shirts today. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, right back here on the Casa D18 Studios channel for another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews when we continue with the Frankenstein story and we take a look at The Ghost of Frankenstein, starring Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Ralph Bellamy, Lionel Atwell, Bela Lugosi, Evelyn Ankers, and Lon Chaney Jr. in the role of the Frankenstein monster. Beginning today, for the next 10 days until the 22nd of October, every single movie will be featuring Lon Chaney Jr. in one of the major roles. Because while the Wolfman is the only Universal monster to have been played by the same actor through every film, the others, not so lucky. Ghost of Frankenstein, Lon Chaney will be playing the Frankenstein monster. Son of Dracula, Lon Chaney Jr. will be playing Count Dracula, or as he's referred to in the film, Count Alucard, which is Dracula backwards. We have 3 more Mummy films coming up before we get to Abbott and Costello Meets the Mummy, all of which will feature Lon Chaney Jr. as the Mummy. And then we've got The Wolfman today, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein with Chaney as the Wolfman, House of Dracula with Chaney as the Wolfman, and Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein with Chaney as the Wolfman. 10 films in a row, all of which have Lon Chaney Jr. in one of the main monster roles. For me, as a Chaney fan, this is going to be a hell of a stretch. And I've never seen the 3 Mummy films that are coming up with him as the Mummy. And I don't remember if I've seen House of Dracula. I know I've seen House of Frankenstein. Don't remember if I've seen House of Dracula with him as the Wolfman. So there's at least 3, maybe 4 films coming up in the next 10 days that I've never seen before. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. Thank you very much to all my loyal fans and viewers out there that tuned in for the premiere, leaving your thoughts and comments over here. Thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you. Likewise, all my loyal fans and viewers out there that tune in just a little bit later in the day, watching on demand, leaving your thoughts and comments down here. Thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate all of my loyal fans and viewers that tune in on a regular basis. Show me that love. Show me that support. Going back to the archives, digging up those old episodes of Renegade of Wrestling, Dad's on Wrestling, After the Bell with Jeff Meacham, Stat Boys Rants, the audio version of Renegades Reviews from its first run, trying to help boost up my viewership hours so I can eventually get monetized, make some money on this endeavor. Thank you very much for each and every one of you guys that tuned in today and joined me, and I will see you guys next time.